There are certain kinds of failure that do not announce themselves with drama. They arrive quietly, like fog settling over a routine you once performed with confidence, until one morning you wake and realize you are doing the same motions you swore you had left behind. You are back where you started, not because you chose it, but because every other direction required a version of yourself you no longer recognize as possible. This is not the failure of falling, this is the failure of returning, and it carries a different kind of weight. It feels less like collapse and more like admission, less like breaking and more like eroding back into a shape you thought you had outgrown. The humiliation is quiet. No one needs to say anything, you know? Today we go deeper into John 21, a chapter that refuses to offer the tidy closure we expect after everything that has already happened. The resurrection has occurred. The tomb is empty. The impossible has been made visible. And yet the story does not end with triumph suspended in air. It ends at the edge of a lake, in the middle of a night that feels older than the miracle, where men who witnessed everything still find themselves pulling on nets as if nothing has changed. This is not a return to faith. This is a return to fishing. And the difference matters, because one suggests hope, and the other suggests the exhaustion of not knowing what else to do when the future you were promised feels unreachable, and the only script left is the one you performed before you knew better. Peter says, "I am going fishing." It is not a grand declaration. It is not rebellion. It is the sound of someone whose interior has gone silent, and in that silence, the body remembers what it knows how to do. The others follow, not because they are inspired, but because there is no better idea, and being alone with what you are thinking feels worse than being tired together in a boat. So they go. They work through the night. They cast and pull, the rhythm of it almost comforting in its predictability, the way any repeated motion can numb the part of you that wants to ask whether this is all that remains. And they catch nothing, not a small catch, not a disappointing yield, nothing. The net comes up empty again and again, and still they do not stop, because stopping would mean returning to shore with no explanation for the hours, no defense against the thought that maybe you are not good at this either, maybe you were never good at anything, maybe the version of yourself you thought you were building was always just performance, and now the stage is gone, and what is left is a man in a boat with wet hands, and no story to tell. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from the work itself, but from the recognition that the work is not working, that effort does not guarantee outcome, that you can do everything you know how to do and still be met with emptiness. It is the exhaustion of someone who keeps moving because stillness would force them to feel the full weight of what they have lost. Peter knows this exhaustion. He knows what it is to be capable, and then to discover that capability does not protect you from becoming someone you do not respect. He has stood in firelight before and heard his own voice say things he did not plan to say, has felt his throat produce denial as if it were reflex, as if the truth of who he was could be hidden behind quick answers, and then forgotten once the moment passed. But the moment did not pass. It lives in him now, not as memory but as identity, a scar that does not heal, because it is not on the skin. It is woven into the way he understands himself in relation to everything he once claimed to be. And so he fishes, because fishing does not ask him to be anyone other than tired, and tired is something he can afford to be. When morning begins to break and the shoreline starts to sharpen into visibility, there is a figure standing there. The text does not say he appeared suddenly. It says he is there, as if he has been standing in that spot long enough for the light to find him, waiting without announcement, watching men work through a night that has produced nothing. He calls out. The voice carries over water the way voices do in that hour, when the world is still quiet enough to hear someone without shouting. He asks if they have caught anything, and the question is not accusatory, it is simply direct, the kind of question that cuts through politeness, and asks for the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. They answer, no, and the word hangs there, small and final, the summary of hours that cannot be recovered. Then he tells them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. It is a strange instruction, specific and unjustified, the kind of direction that makes sense only if you trust the person giving it, or if you are too tired to argue. They throw the net. And suddenly, without transition, without warning, the net is full, not gradually full, not modestly full, so full they cannot haul it in, so full the weight of it threatens to capsize the small logic they had built around their failure. This is not effort rewarded. This is abundance arriving from outside the system they were working within, and it disrupts everything, because now the question is not why the night was empty, but why the morning is not, and what that says about who is standing on the shore. Don recognizes him first. He does not shout it like a discovery, he says it quietly, almost as if he is afraid to name it out loud in case he is wrong. It is the Lord. And Peter, hearing this, does not wait. He does not strategize. He wraps his outer garment around himself, which is an odd detail unless you understand that nakedness in that moment would have been unbearable. That being seen by the one you failed requires covering, even if the covering is symbolic, even if it does nothing to hide what has already been exposed. Then he throws himself into the water. He does not wait for the boat to reach the shore. He does not help with the net. He goes, driven by something that is not quite courage and not quite shame, but some mixture of both. The need to be near and the fear of arrival happening at the same time, and the only way to resolve it is to move. When he gets to the shore, Jesus is already there, and there is a fire. Not just any fire, a charcoal fire. The text specifies this, and the specificity matters because the last time Peter stood near a charcoal fire, he was warming his hands and denying that he knew the man he had followed for years. The smell would have been the same. The light would have flickered in the same way. And now here it is again, not as punishment, not as a reminder in the sense of accusation, but as a kind of return to the scene, a quiet insistence that the place of failure is also the place where something new can begin, though what that something is has not yet been made clear. There is fish already cooking. There is bread. Jesus has prepared food, which is a gesture so ordinary and so tender that it almost does not fit the moment, except that it does because this is what he does. He meets people in their exhaustion and he feeds them, not after they have proven themselves, not after they have apologized sufficiently, but in the middle of their confusion, when they are still wet from the lake and unsure why they came. He tells them to bring some of the fish they have just caught. Peter drags the net ashore. It is full of large fish, 153 of them, and the net has not torn despite the weight. The detail about the number feels almost absurd in its precision, as if someone counted, as if in the midst of everything, there was a moment where the quantity mattered enough to record. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps in the economy of this moment, what matters is not the symbolism but the fact. They were empty, and now they are not, and the transition happened not because they worked harder, but because they listened to a voice they did not immediately recognize and followed an instruction that made no sense until it did. Jesus says, "Come and have breakfast." It is an invitation, but it is also a kind of command, the way a parent might call a child to the table, not asking if they are hungry, simply assuming that hunger is present and that the remedy is to eat. None of the disciples ask who he is. The text says they do not dare, which suggests they know, but knowing does not make the moment less strange. There is something destabilizing about being fed by someone you disappointed, about sitting in the presence of the person whose suffering you could not stay near, and finding that the first thing he does is offer you food. This is not the order you expect. You expect judgment first, or at least questioning, a space where you are required to explain yourself or make restitution. But instead there is fish and bread and a fire that smells like the night you would rather forget, and the meal happens before the conversation, as if the body needs to be attended to before the soul can be addressed, as if being human means being fed even when you are not sure you deserve to eat. After the meal, the real encounter begins. Jesus turns to Peter and asks, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" The question is not abstract. It is personal, specific, using his old name, the name from before, the name that belonged to the man who made promises he could not keep. And the question itself is laced with difficulty, because more than these could mean more than these other disciples, which would force Peter to compare himself and make a claim about his own superiority, or it could mean more than these fish, more than this life you returned to when following me became too costly. Either way, the question cuts, because it refuses to let Peter hide behind generalities. It asks for a declaration, out loud, in front of others, in a moment when every word feels like it could be used against him later. Peter answers, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." But the language shifts. The question uses one word for love, agape, the kind that is total and self-giving, and Peter responds with another, phileo, a word that is warmer, more affectionate, but also smaller, less absolute. It is as if he cannot bring himself to claim the larger love, not because he does not feel it, but because he has learned that what he feels and what he does are not always the same, and he does not trust himself to make promises he cannot verify in advance. Jesus tells him, "Feed my lambs," not "go and be a leader," not "you are forgiven." Just a task, simple and specific, something to do that connects love to action in a way that does not require perfection, only presence. Jesus asks again, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" The same question, the same name, but this time without the comparison. Just the question itself, clean and unavoidable. Peter answers the same way, and Jesus gives him another task, "Tend my sheep." The repetition is starting to press, not loudly, but with the steady pressure of something that will not let you move past it until you have spoken plainly. And then Jesus asks a third time, and this time the text says he uses Peter's word phileo, as if he is meeting him where he is, as if he is saying, even this smaller love, even this careful affection that does not claim certainty, do you have even this? And Peter is grieved, not because he is being accused, but because being asked 3 times mirrors the 3 denials. And he understands that this is not punishment but reconstruction, that each question is an opportunity to speak where he once went silent, to say yes where he once said no, to rebuild in language what was torn down in fear. Peter says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. It is surrender, not in the sense of defeat, but in the sense of giving up the pretense that he can manage his own reputation, that he can control what Jesus thinks of him. He appeals to knowledge beyond his own, to a knowing that sees him more clearly than he sees himself, and he rests his answer there not in his confidence, but in the hope that being known does not mean being discarded. And Jesus responds, feed my sheep. The same task, given now for the 3rd time, and with it the quiet implication that love is not proven in a moment of declaration, but in the long obedience of showing up, day after day, to care for what belongs to someone else, to shepherd not because you are flawless, but because you have been called. There is something unbearable and something necessary about this exchange. It does not erase the past. It does not pretend the failure did not happen. It does not even offer the comfort of hearing, I forgive you spoken out loud. Instead, it does something harder and more durable. It gives Peter a future that includes his failure without being defined by it. It says, you will still fail, you will still falter, and the work is still yours to do. And then Jesus tells him what that work will cost. He speaks of a time when Peter will be old, when someone else will dress him and lead him where he does not want to go, a veiled prophecy of death, of a love that will be tested not in a moment of panic, but in the slow walk toward an end he cannot escape. And after saying this, Jesus says, follow me, not try again, not prove yourself. Just follow, as if following is the only posture that makes sense after everything, as if the way forward is not to go back and undo what was done, but to go forward and see what can be built with hands that have already broken something. Peter turns and sees another disciple following, the one Jesus loved, and he asks, Lord, what about him? It is such a human question, the kind that arises when you are given a hard road, and immediately want to know if someone else is getting an easier one. It is the question of someone who is still comparing, still measuring, still trying to manage the fairness of what has been assigned. And Jesus answers with the edge of finality, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. It is a rebuke, but it is also a release. It says, you are not responsible for anyone else's path. You are responsible for yours. Stop looking sideways. Stop measuring. Just follow. This is where the chapter leaves us, not with resolution in the sense of everything being settled, but with a direction given and a life redirected. Peter does not walk away transformed into someone he was not before. He walks away as someone who has been given permission to continue, who has been seen in his failure and given work anyway, who has been asked to speak his love out loud and then told that love will cost him everything. The story does not end in triumph. It ends in a quiet commissioning, in the understanding that starting over does not mean erasing the past. It means carrying it forward into a future that is still uncertain, still costly, still worth the effort. What John 21 offers is not the fantasy of a clean slate. It offers something more difficult and more true. The possibility that you can return to the place of your failure and find that it is also the place where your calling is renewed. It does not say the failure does not matter. It says the failure is not the final word. It does not say you will stop being afraid or stop doubting or stop making mistakes. It says you will be asked to feed sheep anyway, to show up anyway, to follow anyway, even when the future is unclear and the cost is steep, and the only certainty is that the one who calls you knows exactly who you are and calls you still. There is a particular kind of person who will feel this chapter in their chest, who will recognize the shoreline and the empty net and the fire that smells like memory. It is the person who went back to something they thought they had left behind, not because they wanted to, but because they did not know what else to do. It is the person who avoids certain conversations because being asked a direct question feels like being seen, and being seen feels like exposure. It is the person who keeps working, keeps moving, keeps performing the motions of a life, because stopping would mean admitting that they do not know who they are anymore, or whether they have anything left to offer. It is the person who has heard their own voice, say things they did not mean, who has felt their courage evaporate in the moment it was most needed, who has walked away from something they thought they would die for, and then had to live with the knowledge that they were wrong about themselves. For that person, John 21 does not offer easy comfort. It does not say, "You are fine, everything is fine, just believe harder." It says, "You are not fine, and that is not the end of the story." It says, "You can be known in your failure and still be given work to do." It says, "The charcoal fire is not there to torment you. It is there to show you that the place of your denial is also the place where you can speak again, where you can say yes instead of no, where you can be asked the same question 3 times and answer it 3 times, not because you are being punished, but because repetition is sometimes the only way to rebuild what was broken." The modern equivalent is everywhere. It is the person who takes the old job again because the new dream did not work out and rent is still due. It is the person who goes back to a relationship pattern they swore they had outgrown, because loneliness is harder than compromise, and at least the pattern is familiar. It is the person who performs competence at work while feeling hollow inside, who smiles in public and then goes home and does not know who they are when no one is watching. It is the person who avoids eye contact with the people they used to be close to, because closeness now would require explaining what happened, and they do not have the language for it, or the energy, or the belief that explaining would change anything. It is the person who is so tired of trying to become someone new that they have settled for becoming no one, for disappearing into routine, and hoping that if they stay quiet enough, the questions will stop. But the questions do not stop. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the questions are the only way back to life. You cannot rebuild in silence. You cannot become whole by avoiding the places where you broke. You have to go back to the shore. You have to stand near the fire. You have to let someone ask you out loud whether you love them, and you have to answer, even if your answer is smaller than you wish it were, even if all you can say is, "You know that I do," even if you cannot claim the grand love, only the honest one. And then you have to accept that love, even small and honest, is still love, and that it can still carry weight, and that it can still be trusted with sheep. The chapter does not say that Peter becomes fearless. It does not say he stops doubting or stops struggling or stops being the kind of person who asks the wrong questions at the wrong time. It says he is given something to do. And in the giving of that task, he is given a reason to keep moving that is not about hiding from the past, but about stepping into a future that is still undefined. The specificity of the task matters. He is not told to be a better person. He is told to feed lambs, to tend sheep, to do the practical, repetitive, inglorious work of caring for others. It is not glamorous. It is not a platform. It is the kind of work that requires showing up every day whether you feel like it or not, whether you are confident or not, whether you have resolved all your internal contradictions or not, and that is the point. The work does not wait for you to be perfect. The work exists now, and it needs doing, and you are the one being asked to do it. This is where the chapter becomes unbearable in its mercy, because it refuses to let failure be the end, but it also refuses to make restoration painless. It says you can be welcomed back, but the welcome will include the question you do not want to answer. It says you can be given work, but the work will cost you more than you thought you had to give. It says you can follow, but following means letting go of the need to understand the whole path in advance, letting go of the need to know what will happen to the person walking beside you, letting go of the need to control the narrative and just move forward, because the voice you trust has said, "Follow me," and there is no better direction available. The net that does not tear is a strange detail to include, and yet it is there, precise and deliberate. 153 fish and the net holds. It holds despite the weight, despite the strain, despite the fact that it should not be able to bear what it is being asked to bear. And maybe that is part of the message too, that the structures you thought were too fragile to hold what you are carrying can hold after all, that abundance does not have to mean breaking, that you do not have to collapse under the weight of what you have been given, if the one who gave it knows what you can handle. The net does not tear, the fish are not lost. The work is hard, but it is not impossible. And that is enough. There is no moment in this chapter where Peter is told he is forgiven. The word does not appear. And yet forgiveness is everywhere, not as a transaction but as a posture, as a steady insistence that failure is not the last word, that denial does not disqualify, that running does not remove you from the possibility of return. Forgiveness here is not about feeling better. It is about being given something to do despite not feeling better, about being trusted with work even when you do not trust yourself, about being called by name even when the name reminds you of who you were before you knew how weak you could be. It is forgiveness that does not wait for you to forgive yourself, that does not require you to feel deserving, that simply says, "Here is the work, and you are the one I am asking to do it," and that is all you need to know for now. The chapter ends without closure in the traditional sense. There is no moment where Peter says, "I understand now," or where everything clicks into place, and the past is fully reconciled with the present. Instead, there is a direction, follow me, and there is a warning, it will cost you, and there is a rebuke, stop comparing yourself to others, and there is a task, feed my sheep. And all of these together form something that is not quite resolution, but is more durable than resolution, because it does not depend on feelings aligning or clarity arriving or confidence being restored. It depends only on the decision to follow, to keep moving, to do the work that has been given, to show up again and again, even when showing up feels like the hardest thing you have ever done. This is the lived reality of starting over after collapse. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic in the way we expect. It is quiet and awkward and full of small gestures that carry enormous weight. It is a meal you did not cook, prepared by someone you failed. It is a question you do not want to answer, asked 3 times until you cannot avoid it. It is a fire that smells like the worst night of your life, and also like the morning when something began to shift. It is the realization that you cannot go back and undo what you did, but you can go forward and do something else, and that the something else might matter, might mean something, might be enough. If you are the kind of person who has gone back to the boat because you did not know where else to go, this chapter is for you. If you are the kind of person who has worked through the night and caught nothing and still cannot stop working because stopping would mean facing the silence, this chapter is for you. If you are the kind of person who has been asked a question you could not answer well, and the failure to answer still lives in you like a wound that will not close, this chapter is for you. If you are the kind of person who avoids the fire because the fire reminds you of who you were when you were weakest, this chapter is for you. If you are the kind of person who does not trust yourself anymore, but cannot figure out how to move forward without some kind of trust, this chapter is for you. It does not promise that you will feel whole. It does not promise that the shame will disappear or that you will wake up one day and no longer remember what you did. It promises only that you can be known in your failure and still be given work, that you can speak love imperfectly and still have it heard, that you can follow even when you do not understand the destination, that you can feed sheep even when you are still figuring out how to feed yourself. It promises that starting over does not mean becoming innocent again. It means accepting that innocence is not the requirement, that what is required is presence, honesty, willingness, and the stubborn decision to keep showing up even when showing up feels like walking back into the fire. The shore is not empty. The fire is already burning, the fish are cooking, the question is waiting, and the only thing left to decide is whether you will come when you are called, whether you will sit and eat, even though you do not feel you have earned the meal, whether you will answer the question even though the answer costs you something, whether you will accept the work even though the work is hard, and the future is uncertain and you are not sure you are capable of what is being asked. The only thing left to decide is whether you will follow. If this chapter spoke to you in a quiet way, take a moment to respond. Support this channel by liking the video and subscribing so these stories can continue reaching people who feel alone in their suffering. You can leave a comment with a simple symbol not for others to see, but as a personal act of reflection. And if you know someone who may be carrying more than they can say out loud, consider sharing this message with them. The story is not finished, hope is still available, and meaning can still be found even here